We're going to start now the Maimer of Zois Chukas HaTorah from Parshas Para. This Shabbos we read Parshas Para. Para Duma is a very interesting mitzvah. It's called Chukas HaTorah, the Chuk of the Torah. A Chukah is a mitzvah that doesn't have a reason, that we can't understand the reason. And yet there's various Chukas in the Torah. But here, this specific mitzvah is called Zois Chukas HaTorah. The mitzvah of Para Duma is something special. And to the extent, like the Rebbe starts off in the Maimer, that we say Zois Chukas HaTorah Shetziva Hashem. Vayidaber Avaya, Hashem speaks to Moshe and he says Zois Chukas HaTorah Shetziva Avaya. All the mitzvahs we say, Hashem speaks to Moshe and he says Daber O Bnei Yisrael, speak to the Yidden. Here Hashem speaks to Moshe, he says, he's connecting it again to Havaya. Havaya speaks Hashetziva Havaya rather than saying Hashetzivesi, which means there's something special in this mitzvah, a special connection to the idea of Shem Havaya. It's a special connection to Hashem Havaya. And a special connection to Tziva Havaya. This is the command of Havaya. So in addition, we find that the whole idea of the mitzvah of Chukas, there's various chukas, and yet specifically with this one we say that Shlomo HaMelech says, the Medrash tells us, that Shlomo HaMelech says, Amarti achak mavir echeika mimeni. Shlomo is the wisest of all men. He says, Achakma, there's so much that I understood, there's so much wisdom that I have. And yet when it came to the mitzvah of Para Aduma, no matter how hard I tried, I can never understand it. Another thing that we have is that the Medrash tells us that Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, L'cha ani megala tam para v'lacher chukah. What's the idea of a chukah? What's the idea of a mitzvah which is a chukah? A chukah means, like we know, a mitzvah that we don't understand the reason. But the word chukah also comes from the word chakika, which means engraved. We learned in the previous Mamarim, in connection to what we've learned in the past. There are certain things that aren't dependent on understanding and they can't be measured or they can't be limited by understanding. There's certain things which are in the essence of a Jew. It's not that the mitzvah of Para Duma doesn't have a reason. It's not only that. It's not able to have a reason. Even Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of all people, can't understand it because it's not able to be limited and measured by understanding. It's something that's beyond understanding. It's the essence. This is why it's called Chukas HaTorah. It's the essence that describes what Torah is all about. It's what it means to be a Jew. And that's why it's la'acher chukah, but l'cha ani megala tam para. Moshe Rabbeinu does understand the reason. Because Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who's there to reveal the essence of what a Jew is. Moshe Rabbeinu is the leiv, the heart of a Jew, the essence of a Jew, and for him, the Para Duma makes sense. For him, it's expressed. For anyone else, it's not able to be expressed. That's the idea of Para Duma. Now, what is this Para Duma? We also know another thing which the Rebbe explains in the Sikha before the Maimer, that there are 4 parshiyas that we read in connection to Pesach, which means all of these 4 parshiyas are in connection both to the Gula of Purim and the Gula of Pesach. And like the Gemara says, Mismach Gula L'Gula, one Gula is near another. All of these 4 parshiyas are all connected, and especially Parshas Para, where the Gemara tells us, the Yerushalmi tells us, that li'ayla min mafsikin min para la'chedesh. Between Parshas Para and Achedesh, there's never an interruption. Achedesh is Gula, redemption. Between Para and Achedesh, there can't be an interruption. Each and every one of these 4 parshiyas. And in a sense, even more than that, Parshas Para is about Gula. Gula is about the essence of a Jew being revealed and connected to Hashem. Why Para Duma? Chassidus explains that the idea of Para Duma is the concept of Ratzu V'Shuv. In Para Duma, you had 2 opposites. You took the Para Duma, and you burnt it. Ratzu, it went out, and yet on the other hand, you put into it the water. You put the water, the ashes into the water. You put the ezav, the grass, etc. into it. There's ratzu v'shuv, going up and going down. Now ratzu v'shuv are two opposites, which in essence, the place where it says it is by Maritza Merkava, when it talks about Hashem's royal presence, and it says Achayus, the Malachim that are called Chayus HaKodesh, Ratzu v'shuv. They're constantly going back and forth. What is this back and forth? The back and forth, as explained in Kabbalah and in Chassidus, is that the angels, on one hand, they feel a yearning to their source. They want to connect to their source. That's the Ratzu. They want to just be included in the essence of what they're all about. But then there's Shuv, come down and come into the world in order to fulfill their mission. They have that constant back and forth. The truth is, the Rebbe explains, that the reason why the Chayus are Ratzu v'Shuv is not only because the angels themselves are Ratzu v'Shuv, but because the Chayus Eliki, the godly sustenance that's in the world, is constantly Ratzu v'Shuv. Hashem made the world in a way that the sustenance that sustains the world, we know that we learn in Tanya, that the godly words that make the world come into existence from nothing have to be recreated, have to go every moment from new. It's something which is a constant thing, which means that every given moment, the godly words that sustain the world are re-included in their source. They go back to Hashem, and Hashem says the words again. They go back in order to sustain the world. That's the way the chayus of the world works. Everything in the world is like that. The reason why everything in the world is like that, everything in the world goes back and forth. Let's take time, for example. Time is what expresses what our world is about. What's time about? Time means something that's constantly happening, and yet time is measured. The reason why time is measured is because it starts and stops, it starts and stops. There's a second that ends at the end of the second. It's a constancy, but a constancy that goes and stops, goes and stops. The second continues on until it becomes a minute. It ends with the minute. Which means it's a time that goes and yet it stops. Even the clock that measures time goes like that. Tick-tock, back and forth, back and forth. There has to be a limit to limited and yet a continuation that goes further. That's the way our world becomes a limited world, and yet a limited world which is connected to the unlimited. When we're walking, we go and stop, go and stop. That's the way we continuously walk. There can't be something that goes continuously, because that's the whole idea and the whole way that the measurement of the physical world is that it doesn't continues. There's a limit. That's why it's measured, and yet it's a constancy. Why is everything in the world like that? Because the way Hashem made the world is that the chayas that creates the world is in such a way. Why is the chayas that creates the world in such a way? Hashem wanted to make a world which is a limited world, which is a world that seems to be separate from its sustenance, from the godly sustenance that sustains it, and yet that in reality it could still feel its connection to its source. If Hashem made a world where He just made the world and then that's it, then we'd never be able to reveal the reality, the godly reality that's in the world, which is the purpose of what we're supposed to do. If the godly reality was constantly there in a revealed way, then the world wouldn't be able to exist as a separate, limited world, and the whole purpose is to reveal that reality in the physical world down here. That's why there's the idea of Ratzu v'Shuv. It's always going back and forth. The godly light comes to sustain the world. The word of Hashem, Yehi Rakia, Yehi Oed, etc. It comes, those letters come and they make the world exist. And then they go back and are included in their source. We have it every week, we have it every day. That's what Shabbos is. We go back to be included in our source. Shabbos, we don't create, we don't make anything new. Shabbos, the godly light goes back fully into its source. But every second, it's up and down like that. That's what Ratzu v'Shuv. Now this Ratzu v'Shuv expresses itself in a person. It expresses itself in everything. It expresses itself, the Ratzu V'Shuv, in practical, the way it is in Avodas, for example, the way it's explained. And the way I heard it from a Mashpia and a Shir Chassidus, he explained, if you have a Shliach that was sent out to do a mission, if he doesn't constantly want to go back to 770, if he doesn't constantly want to go back to the Rebbe, then he's not a Shliach. What kind of Shliach is he? He's a person who moved to a different place. And yet if he does go back and leave his place, then he's not a shliach, he's not fulfilling his shlichus. Both things are there. There's the ratzu, the constant yearning to go back and be included in the source. There's the shuv, the realization that I have to be part of the reality that the source wants me to do. Now in truth, they both come from this source. Both the ratzu and the shuv. The ratzu comes from the source because I want to be included in my source. The shuv comes because I realize what the purpose is all about. And yet, in a sense, the ratzu comes from the ispashtus. That means that's the revelation of us. We want to be included in our source. We feel the yearning. We feel the desire to be included in the source. That's the spiritual yearning that a human being feels. The shuv comes from the etzem, from the essence of godliness. Hashem wants us to be here, away from this source, in a world in order to do something, in order to accomplish. So that's called going out, and Isyash was settling and coming back in. But there's the constant up and down, and there's the constant yearning and the constant coming back. The Rebbe gives it in an example in the Farbrengen. The Rebbe compares it to what the Rebbe Rashab said to Friedrich Rebbe on Purim Tafresh Pei, 1920, the last Purim B'chaim Chayuse of the Rebbe Rashab, right before his Histalkos. It was a little more than 2 weeks before the Histalkos of the Rebbe Rashab. Communism was already beginning to spread, then it had reached Rostov, the Bolsheviks. It was a very tough time. The Rebbe Rashab said, the Maimer Reish is Goyim Amalek. The Rebbe Rashab turned to the Friedrich Rebbe and he said to the Friedrich Rebbe, he called him by the name, and he said, Wir wollen ganz sein. We will be complete. Sei in etzem, sei in ispashtus. In our essence and in our ispashtus. The Rebbe tells us, Divrei tzadikim kayamim la'ad. It wasn't just a story of then. It wasn't just something which was said in 1920. It wasn't just something that had to do with the Friedrich Rebbe. It had to do with communism or the Bolsheviks. It has to do with all the time since then, including to our very time. We have to realize that as Chassidim, as Tmimim, as those who are connected to the Rabbeim, to Moshe Rabbeinu, to the essence, we know that regardless of what things look like, regardless of what things may seem physically or spiritually, we will be complete. Complete means in our essence, in our shuv, in the reality of how we fulfill the mission in the world, in the connection to the essence, the chukas, the chakika, and in the hispashtus, in what spreads out from us, in our desire to be connected to the source, in the hispashtus, in the various ideas of our spiritual feelings, etc. So there's in the essence of the soul, and in the way we express it, in the expression of wanting to connect. That's Ratzu and Shuv, but Ratzu and Shuv is not something that we feel all the time in us. The Chayis HaKodesh, the Malachim, they feel it all the time. We don't feel all the time, not just our physical existence, our physical body, even the Neshama doesn't all the time, it's not expressed in the Neshama all the time. There's certain things that it's not by choice. There's what's called Tfiku de Liba. The fact that the heart is always pumping, Ratzu v'Shuv, it's going back and forth. That expresses itself also in the breathing. That's not something which is dependent on our choice. That's our reality, and therefore it's there. We can't choose to have it or not to have it. But in something which is dependent on us feeling it, on us realizing it, on us being able to be in the realization of it over there, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. In the neshama, there's the levels of chaya yechida which are above the neshama, the way it comes into the body. They feel it all the time. The nefesh, ruach, and neshama don't necessarily feel that ratzu v'shuv, the yearning. Sometimes they feel we're here, this is where we are. Or the desire to connect, and this is where we are. the reality of us feels all the time the back and forth. The Eirais don't even feel it. The godly light doesn't always feel it because there's the Keli that limits it. On the other hand, the fact that there's a Keli that limits, that's what causes the desire to want to go out. But then there's the feeling of connection to the essence which causes desire to come back. So this idea of Ratzav Shuv, this is the constancy of who we are, of how the reality of us is connected to our source, which makes us want to fulfill our mission here, and at the same time is yearning to be connected in a revealed way to the source. That's the Ratzav Shuv. That's something which is expressed in the mitzvah of Paraduma.